I didn't drive 400 miles to watch my sister get married. I drove there because my mother decided in a banquet hall full of her favorite people to ask the question out loud. Tell me, did they finally let someone like you have a real career? Or are you still just shuffling other people's paperwork? The room laughed the way people laugh when they don't understand a joke but want to belong to it. My father studied the bottom of his bourbon glass like there was an answer floating in it. My sister's face went stiff under all that bridal contouring. And the man she was about to marry, the groom, the one I'd never met in person, looked at me and lost every drop of color in his face. He didn't look at my mother. He looked at me, at the badge clipped to my blazer. And something in him understood a thing nobody else in that room had figured out yet. Then he said, very quietly, "Wait. Please tell me you're not." But you can't understand why his voice cracked on that sentence until you know what they took from me first. I was 18 the autumn they taught me the rule of our house, which was that being self-made was a beautiful gift, but only for the daughter they didn't feel like paying for. It happened at the kitchen table in our split level in Ohio, the one that always smelled like the cinnamon plug-in my mother kept in the outlet by the stove. I laid everything out in a neat little row. The acceptance letter from Ohio State, the financial aid award, the gap they expected me to cover, which might as well have been the number of stars in the sky. I didn't cry. I practiced not crying in the car. I just said, I worked the numbers 6 ways. I can't make this one work without help. My mother didn't look at the papers. She was sorting coupons, and she kept sorting them, sliding the expired ones into a little discard pile. "You'll find a way," she said. That's the whole point of being a grown-up. Nobody handed it to me either. My father had his laptop open at the end of the table, doing what he was always best at, which was looking too busy to be asked a question directly. I turned to him anyway. "Dad." He glanced up for about a second and a half. "Your mother's got a point," he said, and then he was gone again, back behind the screen. No follow-up. No let's sit down Sunday and figure it out. Just a tidy little sentence that told me I wasn't a daughter they were investing in. I was a bill they were declining. They called it independence. They said the word like it was a present they were wrapping for me. 11 days later, my sister came home from volleyball practice in tears because the alternator on her Civic had died on Route 4 and she'd had to wait 20 minutes for a tow and 3 girls from the squad had seen her. She was 16. She had this gift, even then, for asking for things without ever actually asking. She'd just described the suffering until somebody fixed it. By the following weekend, there was a certified pre-owned Corolla in the driveway with a bow my father had clearly bought at the dealership because it still had the price sticker on the back. Reliable, he said, proud of himself. Safe. My mother dropped the key fob into my sister's hand like she was knighting her. "You deserve to feel secure," she told her. I stood in the doorway to the garage and watched the whole thing. The hug. The squealing. The way my mother kept saying your safety is everything to us. My tuition bill was still sitting on the counter under the fruit bowl where I'd left it, and nobody so much as moved the bananas to look at it. That's how favoritism works in a house like mine. They never sat me down and announced a winner. They just spent the money where their heart was and let me read the receipts. I tried anyway that fall. I enrolled part-time. I took the worst shifts at a diner off the interstate, the 11 to 7, because the overnight crowd tipped better and I could study during the dead hours between the bar rush and the truckers. I learned to make a pound of ground turkey last a week. I had the cost of 1 credit hour memorized down to the penny. And then halfway through the semester, a clerical thing happened, the kind of small bureaucratic hiccup that doesn't matter at all unless you're already living on the edge of a knife. My aid got recalculated. Suddenly, I owed almost $3,000 inside of 2 weeks or they'd drop my classes. So I went back to the kitchen table. I brought the new paperwork. I was so tired I could feel it behind my eyes. My mother didn't even let me get to the number. "No," she said. "If we bail you out now, you'll never stand on your own." I said very quietly, "You're paying for everything for her." My father set down his fork. "We can't afford to put 2 kids through school at once," he said, in that reasonable voice he used when he wanted to sound like the fair one. That's interesting, I said. Because you're not putting two kids through school, you're putting one through, the other one's putting herself through. My mother's eyes went thin. Don't be so dramatic. Your sister's situation is different. College actually matters for her path. For her path, I sat with that. My education was a luxury they decided not to buy. Hers was a necessity they couldn't imagine living without. That night, in my childhood bedroom with the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling from when I was 9, something in my chest went very still. Not sad. Stiller than sad. I understood, finally and completely, that I had spent my whole life trying to earn a love that was never priced for me. They loved me best when I cost them nothing. In the morning, I withdrew. I did it online, alone, clicking through the confirmation screens while my coffee went cold. I watched my student account flip to inactive and felt something I didn't expect, which was relief. The kind you feel when you finally stop trying to push open a door that was only ever going to open in. I packed my life into 2 storage totes and a hockey duffel that used to be my dad's. I didn't make a speech. My mother caught me in the driveway, loading the trunk, and crossed her arms. So that's it, you're just quitting. I didn't fully turn around. I'm choosing a life that doesn't run on your moods, I said. My father came out onto the step, rubbing the spot between his eyebrows like I was a tension headache. You don't have to do this, he said. What are you offering instead? I asked. He opened his mouth. He closed it. That had always been his real answer, the silence. So I finished loading the car and I left, and I didn't look in the rear view until I was past the gas station on the corner. The recruiting and federal careers office I ended up walking into was in a sad little strip mall, between a vape shop and a place that did walk-in tax returns. Inside, it smelled like printer toner and burnt coffee. There was a woman behind the desk, late 40s, reading glasses pushed up into gray hair, name tag that said R. Okafor. She didn't try to sell me anything. She asked me why I was there, like she was checking whether I had a spine to find. I told her the only thing that was true. I want to work somewhere. The rules are the same for everybody, where it doesn't change depending on who somebody likes better. She looked at me for a long beat. Then she slid a stack of forms across the desk. This is the federal background investigation track. It's not glamorous. It's reading, interviewing, walking the truth out of people who'd rather lie. You'll start as a contractor doing field work for security clearances. You good with paperwork? I'm good with the truth, I said. Paperwork's just where it lives. Something in her face shifted. Just barely, like I'd passed a test she hadn't told me I was taking. The forms were endless. Citizenship history, references, my own background. Because you cannot investigate other people's trustworthiness until they've turned yours inside out first. There was a question about family who could vouch for my reliability, and I almost laughed out loud. The people who pick up when you call. The people who show up. I wrote down my old volleyball coach and the diner manager who'd let me sleep in the back booth between the rush and my 8 a.m. class. No family? Okafor asked. Not unkindly. They're more of a cautionary tale, I said. She didn't smile, but she wrote something down. Then you'll have to be your own reference for a while. That's harder than it sounds. I started at the bottom. I want to be clear about that, because people imagine these things as a movie montage, and it is the opposite of a montage. It is a Toyota with 200,000 miles on it and a GPS that's always a beat behind. It is knocking on the doors of strangers to ask whether their neighbor of 14 years drinks too much or gambles or talks to the wrong people online. It is reading a man's entire financial life off a credit report and learning to tell the difference between somebody who had a hard year and somebody who's hiding something. It is sitting across a Formica table in a break room, writing down exactly what a person says, word for word, no editorializing, because in my world, the record is the only thing that survives. Opinions evaporate. Documentation doesn't. I was good at it. Not because I was smarter than anyone. Because I had grown up reading a room for who was being protected and who was being sacrificed, and it turns out that's the entire job. I noticed a thing people skipped over. I heard the pause before the answer. I learned that the truth has a texture, and that lies. Even good ones feel a little too smooth. My family resurfaced the way they always did, which was when something had a price tag attached. The first call came almost 3 years after I left. My mother's voice was warm as a sugar cookie, like we talked the previous Tuesday. "We are so proud of you," she said. I waited. There's always a beat before the ask. I'd learned to let it come. "It's just, your sister's sorority dues went up, and the apartment she wanted near campus is a little more than we planned for." "I can't help with that," I said. "Oh, don't be like that. We're family." Family. The word landed in my ear like a coin in an empty can. My father took the phone then, careful and tired. "Anything at all would mean the world," he said. "To whom?" I said. He didn't have an answer. I told him I had an early field day, which wasn't even a lie, and I hung up and sat in my apartment listening to the refrigerator hum. I waited to feel something dramatic. Rage, maybe, or grief. What I felt was nothing, just a fact confirmed. The distance had changed my whole life, and it hadn't changed them 1 degree. By my 6th year, I'd come off the contract and into a federal role, the kind that doesn't make for good party conversation. I adjudicated. That's the word. When an investigation is done, somebody has to sit with the whole file, the interviews, the finances, the foreign contacts, the criminal checks, and make the call on whether a person gets to hold a clearance. The thing that lets them work on the contracts and the bases and the rooms most people never get cleared to walk into. A favorable adjudication opens a career. An unfavorable one closes doors a person may not even realize they were standing in front of. It is not power you brag about. It's power you carry like a loaded weapon with the safety off. Because a single line in my report can change the entire shape of someone's life, and the only thing that keeps it clean is that I never, ever let it get personal. My supervisor. My first week in that role was a man named Garrett Boone, who said maybe 40 words a day and never wasted one of them. "This work is about the standard," he told me, "not your feelings about the person. The day it gets personal is the day you recuse yourself and walk away. Understand?" "Yes, sir." "You'll see things people would rather you didn't." "I already have." He looked at me over the rim of his coffee. "Your file says you grew up the hard way." "My file's accurate," I said. That was the closest I came to telling anyone. My sister came back into my life through a photo. A cousin tagged me in one of those family albums, and there she was, glowing on a dock somewhere, with a diamond on her hand and a caption full of exclamation points and a man's arm around her. Engaged. I almost scrolled right past. And then I saw his face in the next photo, the close-up one, and the whole floor of my stomach dropped out. I knew that face. Not from a wedding, from a file. His name was Caleb Mercer, and his case had crossed my queue maybe 10 weeks earlier. Not as a problem, exactly. As a pending. He was a young defense contractor, angling for an upgrade to his clearance to take a role on a program that needed it, and his record was clean almost all the way through. Strong evils, no criminal anything. Just one thread that hadn't resolved. A financial inconsistency the field investigator had flagged. Some money that had moved in a way the paperwork didn't fully explain. Nothing that screamed fraud. But in my line, almost clean is its own category, and it's the category that gets a second look. I pulled the file. Same name, same date of birth, same face that was, in approximately 4 months, going to marry my sister. I sat at my desk for a long time. Life has a way of arranging coincidences that feel less like luck and more like a bill coming due. The invitation came a week later. Heavy cream cardstock, gold lettering, my parents' names printed at the bottom like the producers of a show they'd been staging for 30 years. I hadn't spoken to my sister in 9 years. I hadn't set foot in that town since the morning I loaded the duffel bag. I had no plan to go. But the moment I recognized his name, the situation stopped being about a family I'd left and started being about a job I took an oath to do correctly. Because I was in the chain that touched Caleb Mercer's clearance. Because the rules I'd built my whole adult life around required that I be clean as glass. And being clean didn't mean disappearing. It meant doing the one thing my family had never once done for me. It meant declaring the conflict instead of hiding it. The Monday after the invitation arrived, I walked into Boone's office and laid it out. The applicant in queue, my sister's fiancé, the whole tangled mess of it. I asked to be formally separated from anything connected to Caleb Mercer's case, in writing, time-stamped by the book. Boone listened without a flicker, then nodded once. Good, he said. That's exactly what you do. He paused. You okay going back there? No, I said, but I'm going anyway. I RSVP'd yes. I want to be honest about why. Part of it was that I genuinely had no intention of touching that man's case ever again, and the paperwork proving it was already filed. And part of it, the part I'm less proud of, was that I wanted them to see me. Not to gloat, just to stand in a room as the finished version of the person they'd thrown away and let the math do itself. The venue was exactly what my mother would pick, a restored barn with chandeliers hung from the rafters, twinkle lights, a string trio playing something tasteful, the whole thing performing a wealth my parents have never quite had. I wore a charcoal blazer, slacks, low heels, my agency credentials still clicked to my pocket out of pure habit because I'd come straight off a field week. I wasn't trying to make a statement with it, but statements don't always wait for permission. My mother spotted me near the gift table. There was no warmth in her face, no shock, just a flicker of irritation, like a coupon she thought she'd thrown out had turned up expired in her purse. Well, she said, voice thin as cellophane, look who decided to grace us. My sister was beside her in the dress, beautiful and brittle, searching my face for something, and then my mother turned to the little cluster of guests around her, the aunts, the neighbors, the women she'd spent decades performing for, and delivered her line. Tell me, did they finally let someone like you have a real career? Or are you still just shuffling other people's paperwork? The laughter scattered. My father found his bourbon. And, across the room, near the bar, the groom turned around at the sound of my mother's voice, saw the credentials on my pocket, and went white. He crossed the floor faster than was polite. I'm sorry, he said to me, low. I have to ask, the agency on that badge. And he said the name of it, and I watched him do the same math I'd done 10 weeks earlier, and arrive at the same impossible answer. Caleb, I said quietly. We should step somewhere private. We ended up in a side room meant for the caterers, my sister trailing and confused, my parents close behind because my mother could not stand to be outside a conversation she didn't control. The string trio kept playing on the other side of the wall. You're related, Caleb said. It wasn't a question. He'd gone past pale into something gray. She's my sister, I said. My sister's voice came out small. How do you two, you don't even... Your fiancé's clearance, I said, is adjudicated by my office. His file was in my queue. The silence in that little room had weight to it. My mother got there first, the way she always did. Then you have to remove yourself, she said, already sharpening into outrage. Immediately, this is a clear conflict. I already did, I said. The day I saw his name on the invitation, I filed for separation from his case, in writing. It's documented. I haven't touched it since, and I never will. My sister blinked at me. You what? I notified my supervisor the same week, Caleb said hoarsely, and I realized he'd done it too, independently from his end. I disclosed the relationship the second I understood it. Where? He looked at me. We're both clean on this. My mother's face did something complicated. She'd come in ready to accuse me of sabotage, and the floor had moved. Well, she said, I suppose you want to thank you. You walk in here in your little badge, let everyone assume you're some kind of hero, and now you want credit for not ruining your own sister's wedding. No, I said. I don't want anything from you. I came because I was invited, and because I had a paper to file first, make sure my being here didn't cost this man his career. I looked at Caleb. You're not implicated in anything. Whatever they decide about that financial flag, it's somebody else's call now, not mine. But you should resolve it honestly. That's the only advice I'll give you, family to family. He nodded slowly, and relief and dread fought it out across his face. I could have stopped there. I think a kinder person would have. But there was one more thing in my bag, and 9 years is a long time to carry something. I set a thin manila envelope on the catering table. My father's eyes went to it the way a man watches a dog he isn't sure of. "What's that?" my mother said. "My student loan history," I said. My father's head came up. My mother actually laughed. "That's ancient history. You dropped out. That was your choice." "It was," I said. "And it's not ancient. It's still on my credit." I slid the second page out. "This one isn't mine, though." "This one's yours." My father leaned in to look, and the color drained right out of him because he was looking at his own signature dated 9 years back on a financial responsibility certification he'd filed with the university, a form attesting that he was still financially supporting me as a dependent, filed after I had already withdrawn. Used to keep certain aid and tax benefits flowing, benefits that, near as I'd ever been able to reconstruct, had quietly underwritten my sister's freshman year. "That's not," my father started. "You certified to a federally funded institution that you were supporting a student you had refused to support," I said. 11 days after I withdrew. "I have the withdrawal date. I have the form." "They don't reconcile." "Why?" my sister whispered. "Why would you keep this for 9 years?" "I didn't keep it for 9 years," I said. "I do this for a living. Following money that doesn't add up. I pulled my own thread last spring the way I'd pull anyone's, and there it was." I looked at my father. I wasn't even angry when I found it. I was just tired in a way I can't explain. Caleb, who understood paperwork the way I did, had gone very quiet. "That kind of certification," he said carefully, "if it touched federal aid, that's not nothing." "No," I agreed. "It's not nothing." My mother's composure finally cracked down the middle. "Why are you doing this? At her wedding? In front of these people?" "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm explaining my absence. 9 years of it. Everyone in that hall thinks I disappeared because I'm cold or jealous or couldn't hack it." I nodded at the envelope. "That's why I left. Not because I quit. Because I finally saw the ledger and I understood which side of it I was on." My sister sat down hard on a folding chair. The veil had slipped sideways and she didn't fix it. "They told me you just stopped calling," she said. "They said you got proud and cut us off." "I know," I said. "I know they did. I believed them." Her voice broke on it. "I was 17. I believed them." "I know," I said again. And the truth is, I'd known that for a long time, that she'd been a kid handed a story, the same way she'd been handed a Corolla, without ever being told what it cost. My father had sunk into a chair beside her, both hands over his mouth. "I didn't understand the form," he said through his fingers. "Your mother handled the school paperwork. I just signed where she—" "For God's sake, Daniel," my mother snapped. And there it was, the reflex, protecting the version of the story over the people in it. My sister rounded on her, and I had never once in our lives heard her use that voice on our mother. "Did you do this?" "Mom, look at me. Did you sign me up for a year of school on money that came from saying you were paying for her?" My mother's eyes flicked and hardened and went cold as a January window. "We did what we had to do," she said. "She left. She made her choice." "I left. She made her choice." "I left," I said, "after you closed every door I had. That's not the same as choosing." Nobody talked for a moment. Out past the wall, the trio finished a song and a few people clapped, not knowing. My sister looked up at me with her makeup ruined and her veil crooked, and what was in her eyes wasn't anger, and it wasn't even quite grief. It was recognition, which is worse. "You didn't come here to blow up my wedding," she said. "No. You came to tell the truth." "I came because I was invited," I said. "The truth just came with me. It's been waiting 9 years for a room." She stood up. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand the way she used to when she was little and skinned her knee, and she said, "I need a minute." and she walked out the side door into the cold, veil and all. Caleb looked at me, then at my parents, then at the envelope. "I think," he said slowly, "we're going to postpone." He didn't sound angry. He sounded like a man who'd just learned the foundation he was about to build a house on had a crack running through it. "I'd rather start honest than start blind." "That's the smartest thing anyone said all night," I told him, and I meant it. I gathered my pages back into the envelope, calmly, not rushing, because the thing about telling the truth correctly is that you don't have to slam any doors. The truth closes them quietly behind you. I found my sister out in the parking lot, hugging her bare arms against the November wind, breath fogging in the security lights. For a long while, neither of us said anything. Then she said, "Did you hate me? All those years?" "For a while," I said. There was no point lying to her now, not at the end. She nodded, taking the hit without flinching, which was new. "I had a car and a sorority and a whole life," she said, "and I never once asked where it was coming from. I just thought we had enough. I never thought about why there was enough for me and not for you." "You were a kid," I said. "Kids don't audit their parents. That's not the crime." "What's the crime then?" I thought about it. "Spending your love like a budget," I said. "And letting one of your kids think she's the line item you cut." She laughed, this wet, wrecked little laugh. "You always talk like a person who's already forgiven everybody." "I haven't," I said, "but I'm not going to carry it the way they wanted me to either. Hating them was just another way of living in that house. I moved out a long time ago." The investigation into the certification came later, and it was nothing like television. No handcuffs at the door, just letters from the university, an audit, a repayment my parents made through an attorney my mother insisted on calling, an overreaction. My father aged a decade over one winter. My mother told the relatives I had a vendetta. Some people will choose the story over the daughter every single time, and you can't make them stop. And at some point you have to decide you're not going to spend your one life waiting for them to. Caleb resolved his financial flag himself, honestly, weeks later. The thread turned out to be a misfiled transfer between accounts. The boring kind of truth that lives at the end of most threads, if you're patient enough to pull them. He kept the clearance. He and my sister didn't marry that fall, but they did, quietly, the next spring, in a courthouse with 11 people. And she asked me to be there, and I went. I met my father once, alone, at a diner off the highway that winter. He looked smaller than I remembered, the way people do when the story they hid behind finally falls down. "I should have read the form," he said. "I should have read all of them. I should have asked you a single real question one time." "Yes," I said. "You should have," he cried, a 60-year-old man undone by a clarity that showed up 30 years late. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "Good," I said. "Don't expect it." He winced. I leaned in. "But I'm not interested in hating you for the rest of my life either. That's not mercy. It's just that I have somewhere better to keep my attention." He writes me letters now. Actual paper letters in his cramped engineer's handwriting, about the weather and his tomatoes and the bird feeder he put up. The apology is in there, woven quiet between the ordinary lines, like a language he's still learning the grammar of at 62. I read every one. I don't always write back, but I read them. My mother and I don't speak. I used to think there'd be a scene someday, a reckoning, an apology with my name in it. There won't be. She'll defend her version until the day she dies, and the strangest thing is that it doesn't keep me up anymore, because I finally understood what I'd actually been owed, and it wasn't an apology. It was the truth, told once in a room full of the people she performed for, where it couldn't be coupon clipped or explained away, or signed off on a form. My sister and I talk now, carefully, not like best friends, not like strangers, more like two women raised in the same house who survived it with different scars. There's love there. There's distance there. There's something I've decided to call enough. They handed me a word when I was 18 and meant it as an eviction notice. Independence. I kept the word. I just rewrote what it meant, not abandoned, not exiled, not the kid who couldn't cut it. Just a woman who finally stopped asking permission to be worth something and went out and became worth something on her own, with a badge and a clean record and a name I earned. One honest file at a time. If any part of this sat heavy in your chest, sit with it a minute before you scroll on. Think about the quiet arithmetic of favorite children. Think about what it costs a person to be the line that got cut and what it takes to stop bleeding from it. And if you've got someone in your life who needs to hear that surviving an unfair house is not the same as failing in it, send this their way. I'll be right here telling the next one. The strange thing about that night in the catering room is that I didn't win anything. There was no trophy, no apology I could frame, no moment where my mother's face crumpled into the regret I'd rehearsed in my head for 9 years. What I had instead was an envelope of paper and a quiet that finally belonged to me instead of to them. And somewhere in the long drive home, I understood that the whole story had been written years before that wedding, written in small choices, one at a time, by everyone in it. My parents made a choice every time they spent the money where their hearts were, and let me read the receipts. That choice didn't stay small. It compounded year over year the way a debt does, until it came due in a barn full of chandeliers in front of all the people my mother had spent her life performing for. Caleb made a choice too, the second he recognized a conflict, to walk into his supervisor's office and say it out loud instead of hiding it. That choice saved his career. I made the same one the day I saw his name and filed my separation paperwork before I ever set foot in that town. 2 people did the honest thing without coordinating, and 2 people got to keep their good names. Cause and effect is not poetry. It's just arithmetic that takes a long time to add up. If I could hand my 18-year-old self anything across those 9 years, it wouldn't be comfort. It would be 3 plain things I had to learn the hard way. The first is that doing right by people, even people who never did right by you, is not weakness. I never falsified a file. I never touched Caleb's case to settle a score, though God knows I could have. Refusing to become what hurt me is the only revenge that doesn't rot you from the inside. The second is to keep your eyes open and learn to read what's actually in front of you. I spent a childhood learning to tell who was being protected and who was being spent, and that same clear-eyed attention became the work that fed me. Truth has a texture. Pay attention and you'll feel it. The third is the plain stubbornness to keep going when no one is clapping. Nobody watched me study in a back booth at 3 in the morning. Nobody handed me the standard I built my life on. I had to be my own witness for years, and that turned out to be the thing that made me. So if you grew up the line that got cut from the budget, hear me? The unfairness was real, and it was not a verdict on your worth. You can be decent without being a doormat. You can be sharp without being cruel. You can outlast a house that tried to make you small. They handed me the word independence like an eviction notice, and I kept it, and I rewrote what it meant. Not abandoned, not exiled. Just a woman who stopped asking permission to matter and went and mattered anyway.